the reason why we, on the scales of all the statistics are coming out fairly small is because there's a number of deals that are never, ever published. And Sweden is no doubt the biggest market. But it is also the market in IPD that is mostly covered. Basically, we don't give any numbers in Denmark or in Norway or in Finland. It's very few companies that are actually giving numbers to IPD. That is one of the weaknesses. And the other one is, as I said, there's a lot of off-market deals and we don't announce them. I mean, I know from a fact, even though I talk very much about transparency, there's a number of sellers who are not interested in us announcing what we bought. So PATRIZIA invested last year in a number of property. We never announced it because the seller asked us to not announce it. And for me personally, I just want to make a good deal. I don't need to get in a headline somewhere and say, yeah, we bought this and this. But transparency is a huge issue, and it's something that we have to work on. So I also agree with you that the direct investments from the pension funds is very, very high. And a number of them are currently, all across the Nordic region, are currently looking into selling off some of their local properties in order to risk diversify into rest of Europe. Some of the Finnish pension funds have up to 90 to 95% of the total volume on the balance sheet, direct investments in Finland, because most of them have had the idea that it's basically the local people's money, so it should go back into the local communities, but also because that's the markets they knew, and that's how they started. Both in Sweden, in Norway, in Finland, and in Denmark, they are either selling off or using the surplus cash they're coming in right now to invest in other countries. I mean, that's a very clear trend. So I think over the next few years, a number of interesting opportunities are going to come out in the market, because the pension funds, when they invest in something, like I think Midtown, the CBD area of Stockholm, I think there are 3 buildings or something left that is basically on other hands than pension funds. The rest are owned by the pension funds, and they will own them the next 20 years. And that's the issue about the Nordics, is that our pension funds are actually way too strong. They believe way too much in their own markets. And that is something that we need to somehow work on. If we had other investors, then you will see an average about 7 years, and then it'll be turned around again. But with pension fund investors locally, they will keep it. Another thing I'd like to point out is that the reason why a lot of international investors have stayed out the last few years, and you can see it on which in Sweden is fairly good, on the tendency is that about 5 years ago, 50% of all the transactions were done by international investors. Now I think we're down to about 15-20%. One thing is, of course, the crisis, but the other thing is also the currency issue. Currency has been coming up quite a lot for a lot of investors, and the Swedish krona have seemed to be fairly volatile. Over the last, for 3-4 years ago, it was 11 Swedish krona to 1 euro. Now it's 8.6 to 1 euro. That, of course, has a huge impact if you have not, in any way, shape, or form, done this one is a good way, but it could go the other way if you haven't done any currency hedging. Sorry, it's going to take like. The thing is that for me, you need to know what you're doing. And I have to say, there has been a lot in Denmark and Finland and Norway and Sweden, international investors coming in, thinking that they could steal away loan portfolios or property portfolios and get haircuts that simply the Danish, Swedish, and all the other banks were saying no to. And I have personally spoken to, before my time in PATRIZIA, quite a number of these international and mostly, I have to say, UK investors, thinking that they could get at least a 50% haircut. It never happened, it has never happened, and it will never happen. So that's why it was difficult for them to come in. Because people were just going, if you think we're stupid, it's fine, but don't come back and talk to us. We're not going to deal with you. And that is what happened, and that's why it has been very difficult for a number, I'm not going to name names, but a number of UK investors to come into, for example, the Danish market. those who have been able to actually access has accessed it with local people, had a local team, a local partner. And we actually see quite a number of international investors all over the Nordic region, but always either with their own team that they're setting up or with a very good local partner. And I think that's key if you want to do business in the Nordics.